Hello, and welcome to Altavita Symposium Day 3. My name is Caroline Boyle, Global Account Manager at Altavita. Today we are discussing tech. COVID has accelerated technology adoption in many aspects, particularly in travel and hospitality sectors. So I'm excited today to hear insights from our hospitality technologists as they discuss how the Internet of Things, such as touchless tech and virtual concierge, will improve guest experience, or how density sensors will make indoor spaces safer. During the panel discussion, I encourage everyone to use the chat function, say hello, tell us where you're tuning in from, or drop your questions for the panelists, as we'd like to make this as interactive as possible. We will finish our Day 3 with a short fireside chat with James Foice, Chief Executive of the Association of Service Department Providers, on duty of care and the science behind guest experience. And now I'd like to welcome the COO and co-founder of Altavita, Karolina Saviova, who will moderate the panel.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you, Caroline. So we're really right in the middle of the symposium, so I would like to highlight that the common denominator between our sessions is to focus on unlocking opportunities. Earlier this week, we learned about the new trends emerging in temporary housing, as well as supply and demand driven by global mobility. In today's session, we have the pleasure to really focus on the guest experience, as well as enhancing operational efficiency of corporate housing providers, which is powered by smart and sustainable technology. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dimitrios Zappos, the co-founder and executive chairman of Cliveo, and Steve Davis, the CEO of Operto. Welcome, guys.
Good morning.
Hello.
Great pleasure having you. So throughout the session, we'll also have the opportunity to listen to video messages by Shovan Sengupta, who's the Vice President of a hotel segment for Schneider Electric. And last but not least, the audience, welcome to say hi and also send us your questions or perhaps trends that you're currently seeing in the sector. We'll be happy to keep this section interactive. And yeah, so could you guys please introduce yourself first, perhaps starting by Dimitrios?
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you for inviting us to this panel. My name is Dimitrios Zappos. I'm the co-founder and chairman of Cliveo. I'm a tech entrepreneur and more recent investor. I co-founded several startups, including One Fine Stay, which was in this sector. It was a short stay hospitality business. And more recently, Cliveo, which is a platform for keyless entry.
Thank you so much. Off to you, Steve.
Good morning, Steve Davis, CEO of Operto, calling in from not so sunny Vancouver, Canada. At Operto, we are about intelligent design and frictionless technology and helping the consumer, the owner, and the ecosystem of short-term rentals really thrive. And we're really excited to be part of this panel to share some of our insights on what's going on in the market, and we look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Steve. Without further ado, I would like to kick off this session by really quoting the Hilton CEO. He recently said that the travel comeback depends really on how quickly the contactless tech features are going to be rolled out. So what, in your words, Dimitrios, means smart technology, and why is it so relevant for the travel comeback?
Yes, smart technology is an interesting moniker. Smart technology, loosely speaking, is about everyday objects connected to a network. This comes under the umbrella of what people sometimes term Internet of Things, or IoT. So Internet of Things is effectively the Internet of devices are embedded in everyday object that we use. And the key ingredients of this are threefold. First of all, you've got sensors and actuators. Sensors are things like a thermostat, things that can read temperature, for example, or an electric strike that can open a door, for example, an actuator. The second ingredient is hardware that controls those sensors. So embedded devices that do some processing. And the third ingredient is connectivity, is the link of those things to the internet. Or external networks. In hospitality and in property, there's lots of applications. There's consumer applications, for example, things like a smart speaker or a wearable. There's a commercial application or stuff applications like, for example, you might have an air conditioning controller for public space in a hotel, or you might have industrial applications like, for example, a factory sensor for things like equipment maintenance or logistics applications. I mean, to give you a sense, one of the very first uses of the term IoT or Internet of Things came from logistics for fast-moving consumer goods. So, and the question I guess most people ask is that, okay, smart technology, what's so different to the internet? And the way I think about this in a nutshell is that you think of the internet as being the network, the internet of information. It's the network that sits underneath the web, which is this giant distributed database of information we have and you can access that enables e-commerce. Whereas the Internet of Things is effectively a series of technologies that are the equivalent of the internet, but are for physical objects, not for information. You can think of it as a web of things, let's say. So for me, I think the relevance here is that the Internet of Things, especially for hospitality and property, relates to the softwareization of everyday objects. Now, the interesting thing, Carolina, is that you asked me, so what's the second part to that? One is, what is smart technology? So this is what smart technology is about, roughly. But why is it relevant to the travel comeback? And I think the interesting thing here is that with COVID, what we have seen is some change in behavior. And my belief is that we'll be coming back off COVID, but we're not going to be coming back to exactly the same thing, exactly the same position when we left. There have been some changes. And in a nutshell, for me, the short-term change that we're forced to have are going to drive some long-term behavior. And we're seeing this in some other sectors. For example, you've seen retail and home deliveries increase quite significantly during lockdown. In the US, for example, to give you some interesting stats, before COVID, we had something on the lines of about 3% of households were taking delivery of groceries to their home. At the worst part of the lockdown, we're talking about 66% of people have tried that, 66% of households. So it's a step change, a mega trend. And about a quarter of those, 26% of those households tried online deliveries for the first time. Now, this is not going to change. We're going to come off COVID and go back to how it was. It may not go back completely, but there'll be some change of behavior. And for me, why is smart technology important here is because there have been some changes on the hospitality side that drove a change of behavior. Like, for example, the need of having socially distanced access to things. Accessing properties, accessing doors, accessing spaces without touching things because people feared the idea of touching surfaces for fear of getting COVID. But the interesting aspect is that also led people to taste new ways of doing things, new technologies. And I think that will basically make people more amenable to new ways of interacting in a hospitality setting. Yeah. So for me, there's a short-term thing and the long-term thing. The short-term is obvious, but long-term, I think, remains to be seen.
Thank you. And what about you, Steve? So you're really helping property managers to streamline their operation and improve guest experience.
That's right.
So what are you currently seeing? Do you see an acceleration in terms of the adoption of technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable that we're sitting at a precipice now with, and COVID has really brought forward the timeline in terms of the adoption of technology, whereas people before, might have had the luxury of easing their toes into the pool and figuring out how the technology is going to touch their business or the experience that they're trying to give to their guest. What we're seeing now is a rapid move to technology as a way of enabling not only the guest experience, but also the owner's ability to manage not only their business, but also the third party ancillary services that plug in. So absolutely, I think what we're going to see is a real nexus point for the industry in the next year, where it's going to be all in on technology, and it's an exciting time, I think, for no matter where you fit in the industry to plug in and sort it out.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that as well with our temporary housing providers that we work with. So before we were seeing a lot of, for example, meet and greet. Now it's really seen even as an unsafe practice. So we definitely are seeing a greater adoption of contactless technology.
Yeah.
So perhaps at this stage, I would like to invite or rather listen to our video message from Shovan Sengupta, who will let us know as well what kind of technology is available on the market.
Let me first start with the fact that the sensor technology has been there for the last couple of years, maybe a little more than that. A lot of operators have been moving away from key card technology in the guest room specifically, and door switch technology in the United States to more occupancy-based sensor, and mainly two reasons from what I think. One, it gives you a great feeling, because there is an element of touchless already. When you open the door of a hotel room, because of occupancy sensors, you have a welcome scene. A particular lighting standard is set in which the extreme door lamp would be on, and then a particular light, maybe the bathroom light or the foyer light, would be on. So it gives you a great feeling when you enter the room without having to touch the door switch next door or to put the card in the card holder, etc. The second thing is obviously the thermostats are automatically set to what we call in technical terms of set point, where if it's 27 or 26, then it's automatically going into that, and then the room has that comfort feeling. So, and on top of that, obviously the occupancy sensor is based on sensing human motion. So when a person has left the room, it has an element of energy saving because lights and the aircon goes back to the set back temperature, so that there is no wastage of aircon, there's no wastage of energy, and all the lights are off based on the occupancy of that particular guests. So it goes into an occupied mode, and the guest leaves, it goes into an unoccupied mode. So the technologies have already been there. Of course, company like ours have been providing technologies to all the big hoteliers across the world. We have more than 100 plus hotels using that technology.
So yeah, well, we're back. So there's definitely a lot of things happening at the moment. So Siobhan mentioned particularly, again, the check-in, the remote check-in, which is increasingly popular. So Demetrius, can you please tell us a bit more how that actually works? And I know that you piloted that product with One Fine Stay in London. So I would be interested, what are the immediate benefits for the property managers, and what does it mean for guest experience?
Yes, thank you, Carolina. So Clevio is a digital key management platform. It works with a smart intercom, with a hardware device, which can connect to any door, be that a communal door or a private door, and it can securely connect the door to any device that can access the internet. So you can actually open any door with your smartphone. You can open doors crucially from anywhere. So you can let people in if they can call you and say, let me in. You can control entry. You can grant and revoke access to anybody at the stroke of a key. So you softwareize access opposed to making it hardware. You can also audit access. You can say who has entered when. It's universally compatible, so it works with any door and intercom combination. It works both in commercial settings as well as residential settings as well. It works in an individual private door in a private home, and it works in a hotel door or a retail store or a pub or wherever you want. It's also retrofit, so you don't have to actually change existing locks and keys. You can use what you have, and you can stick it on top. And also it's resilient, can work with both 4G or GSM networks and Wi-Fi. So you don't actually have to have a broadband contract to be able to use that. So it's effectively a universal access device, really, that makes your phone your key. Thinking about the types of things we do on our phones these days, we book travel, we do social networking, we buy groceries, we do our banking. It's ridiculous that the access hasn't gone on our phones yet, but there's very good reasons for that. So that's what we do at Clevio. And it's useful, I would say. So you asked me about the benefits of why is this kind of useful for people who are in this industry, in hospitality and property, is that it does two things. And I think Steve mentioned that before, is that one is that you reduce operating costs as a business, costs to serve your customers and to operate generally. And also it improves the customer experience as well. It's useful for anyone who manages or accesses physical spaces, property managers, residential managing agents, shorted operators, PRS, buy to rent, office spaces, co-working spaces. We have clients now that have, for example, yoga studios or gyms. These are kind of obvious use cases for anyone who manages any kind of access to physical space. Now, the benefits to an operator depend on the exact business model you have. I'll give you an example from personal experience. I used to be an operator at one fine stay of a short-let business that typically worked with an inventory of private principal primary residences, homes, effectively. And these homes were distributed around in a city everywhere. They all had different types of access. Some were apartment flats, some were individuals of single door homes, some had like 2 or 3 doors to get there. We even had a boat on the canal. There were so high-end homes, was sort of a luxury upscale business model. And for us, what became apparent is that access to a home became a constraining factor for service. And we actually we estimate the kind of cost savings of moving away from physical keys to a digital access. And we found that roughly on a per stay basis, we could save 22, 25 pounds per stay for moving to a keyless entry technology. And that did not even include the actual cost of the meet and greet. We continued with meet and greets. Even without that, there was significant benefit. Now, what are these savings for? And I would say that about 1/3 of stays in a high-end setting like ours there required some form of ad hoc access to the property. So think of it as exception handling or service provision or something like that. That was not standard. So boiler breaks, you have to send an engineer to fix it, for example. Around half of these costs were staff-related costs, driver time, maintenance contractor time to reach the property. And about 1/6 of them were kind of maintenance call-outs. We also had sort of meet and greet travel time, so the travel time required to go to the property. So if you got rid of keys, suddenly it just simplifies the business because you don't have to have a physical key present at the same time as other assets, your people, the guests, the homeowners, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of hidden costs in managing physical keys, locksmith call-outs, ad hoc movements of keys. You have to have extra keys for resilience in case you lose them. You have to spend time tracking them when somebody loses them, investigations and all that. Those hidden costs mount up, add up, and in our experience, the cost of installing a digital sort of solution could be recovered within 5 to 7 stays. It's a very quick payback.
I think that's a great point, Dimitris, in terms of the maintenance that you've mentioned, because that's something that people tend to omit as well. So, which brings me to kind of the next question for Steve, because I know that they're focusing really on the housekeeping platforms as well, which automate a lot of the steps that property managers need to make to get the property ready. Yep. So what is your view on this, Steve, and how can you help the property managers to streamline their operations effectively?
Yeah, so we're taking a technology first approach at Operto. So we are looking at how do we actually create sort of the operating system, for lack of a better word, whereby we can help not only enhance the guest experience, but the owner experience, and then also the sort of ancillary services experience. So housekeeping, third parties who add value to their stay. We are, there's no doubt that by giving seamless, frictionless technology to those providers of services, we're seeing huge cost benefits to our into our ecosystem. So throughout that sort of chain of people who are involved in any sort of property, the technology is just driving more and more ROI for our customers. So we're excited where it's all going, and at the end of the day, the being able to offer excuse me, an end-to-end solution where from the time that they book to the time that they leave, that the technology, their interaction with technology is just adding more and more more positive experience, I guess, as you go, is really what we're I guess putting all of our chips on the board for, and we're going to see that that's going to become more and more important as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Steve. So I would like to look a bit into these questions that we are receiving. I've seen that Ben Cross has been extremely active in the chat, which is great.
Saw that too.
So yeah, thank you so much, guys. So let's dive in. So I had this question. So what is the technology feature which will change corporate housing or perhaps hospitality in the next 2 years? So what do you think that is going to be the mega trend? Who wants to go first?
Well, I think no, you go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, I mean, we hold the greatest invention probably of in history in our hands every day, right? I don't think that anyone's cracked the usefulness of the phone, and its ability to, hugely disrupt this market. If I can, I'll just tell a quick story. I was actually lucky enough. I was in the room about 10 yards away from Steve Jobs when he actually pulled out the first iPhone. I was in the Moscone Center in 2007. I literally could have shook his hand, and I remember that moment when he pulled out the phone for the first time and sort of said, like, "Here it is," and you knew that was a moment in time when technology was going to absolutely disrupt in ways we couldn't actually anticipate from that moment forward. And I think that, again, we don't really know where this is going to go, but what we do know is it's coming. And I believe that being able to figure out how we can, from improving the experience of everyone in the ecosystem through smart technology, frictionless technology, technology where you can actually put an ROI against it, is where this is all going to go. And I do believe that, to Demetrius's point earlier, we've got, there's a ways to go, but I think that we do have the tools and the sort of vision that is necessary to start that journey. And I'm excited for it.
Thank you so much, Demetrius.
My addition to this, my 2 cents on this one, I agree with Steve. I think the interesting thing here for me is that technological impact varies between the short term and the long term. And most of us completely overestimate the short term impact. People say, there's new technology, there's new gadgets, something new comes up, and we way overestimate how quickly it will take off. But then we also tend to, as humans, underestimate the longer term impact. We don't see the trend. We tend to see the moment, but not the trend. Again, to give you an example here is if you take something like the fax machine. The fax machine was patented. Most people won't believe this. It was patented in the 19th century. Somebody actually invented the telefax machine, the fax machine, in the 1890s. It was actually first used in anger and at scale in the 1980s. And the reason for this is because you had for the first time networks, like telephony networks, fixed line networks available, and you had more than one person sort of being able to talk to their friends and send fax machines. It is still in use. The NHS in the UK, the National Health Service, is the biggest user of fax machines in the world. It hasn't gone away. So if you ask me what's going to impact hospitality, what I would say is that it's the platformification of technology. It's becoming the norm where you don't have to think about all these edge cases. It becomes the norm, like with the internet. With the internet, it took about 20 years for it to mature to a stage where people don't think what browser to use.
For sure. And that's a fantastic point. The platformification of the industry is coming. And again, just to sort of your original question, I don't believe that we know where this is all going, but it's going in that direction.
We have sometimes comments like technology is going to remove human-centric interaction with guests. we do hear it all the time. So what are your thoughts about it? How can we make sure that guests are still going to get the best service?
I think that it's a very difficult one because it's all in the operator's hands, right? So what kind of operator are you? Are you a more of a hands-on operator? Are you more of a hands-off operator? I do think that as you have a younger generation, digital native generation, that is now going to be over the next 10 years sort of making up a huge part of the market, whether it's in business or in leisure travel. This is a generation which grew up on technology. They don't know a world where there wasn't an internet. They do not know a world. They don't even probably know what a fax machine is. And so, again, we are going to see, there's always going to be a need for that human touch, that interaction, that level of service which people are accustomed to. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see who's most effective at dialing it up and dialing it down, because as myself as a business traveler, I don't always want a huge amount of touch. I want to be able to go from the airport to my room, check in, put my bags down, and not deal with anyone. And some people are on the opposite end of that spectrum. So it's a great question. I think that there's always going to be a need for some degree of interaction, human interaction. You can't really replace that with AI or technology per se, but it's going to be interesting to see who cracks that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That after all, it really depends on the operator, how they handle the relationship with the guest. I see Demetrius smiling. So
I'm smiling, Carolina, because I spent a lot of time pondering this question in my previous life as an operator of a high-end hospitality service. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort thinking about this and thinking about what the guest wants, what the experience wants. Because what we're trying to do really is to deconstruct the high-end hotel experience for a guest, what they're getting and what do they want and what are they getting. And a lot of things we do as service providers make no sense. There's so many things that as a business operators you do, especially in hospitality, which are not in line with what the customers expect. It's just because of custom and tradition and history. Meet and greet is a classic example. I don't know any business traveler who ever went to a hotel who preferred to stand in a line of people to be served by a well-meaning but ultimately ineffectual front-of-house professional, only for them to take their details that could have been provided in advance or hand over a key which have been received by a machine or a smartphone. IoT and technology kind of limited all this stuff. The question is, what does the customer want? They want engagement, no doubt. They want service. But the service that they want is not what's being provided. And this is across the board. And another classic example is the difference. We were pondering the difference between 5-star and 4-star hotels. And if anyone knows the answer, what the difference is, I will give you a prize. The answer is that you have to have wine in the a la carte menu to be able to qualify as a 5-star operator, and you have to have basic conference facilities. Who cares? There's a lot of stuff like that. For sure. Your customers, all the people on this call, your customers don't care about this stuff. And you have got a new set of customers who care deeply about just enough technology to make their life easier, simpler. For me, convenience is the single biggest step change here in consumer demand from younger travelers. They want convenience at the expense of many, many other things.
Yeah, it's technology allows you to dictate how much you want to engage. And if I want zero engagement and I just want it all on my phone and I want it frictionless, then I can choose that. If I want more engagement, I can choose that as well. And I think that is being able to. I think the check-in at in reception is a brilliant example, right? People don't want that, and with where this industry is going is that I believe firmly that is going the way of the dodo, and we'll see.
That's a great point. So back to the audience, really tell us, what is it that your customers, especially the corporate travelers, want from the guest experience? It would be great to understand as well from you directly. And perhaps we can add a bit more complexity. and bring in the the talk about voice concierge at this stage. So perhaps let's listen to the message by Chauvin first, and we can comment after.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Carolina, because voice as a technology, whether it's the concierge service or in terms of even guest room application, has been under study for a while. We as a company, without naming the particular customers that we are working with, but we are working with two very reputed operators right now in doing a voice concierge technology as well as a voice technology to provide guest room application, guest room control systems. The one hotel we actually have done a proper pilot, I would say, and it's been running for a year. Uh, However, the hotelier has not yet deployed it on a mass scale. So I think it's still in a mindset where people want to watch, see and watch what's going to happen in the near future. But as I said, there are companies opening up. I know that our partners like Volara, etc., are also deploying a lot of hotels in other parts of the world, in the US and in the Middle East, etc. So I feel it's here to stay. It's going to be accelerated. There are some people who are slightly concerned about the cybersecurity part of the equation. But I think that's being taken care of. The pilots that we have done so far, we have not had any complaints. We are being approached by another company to do a third pilot. Personally, I think Voice Concierge will take over, maybe not immediately, but in a span of 4 to 5 years, a lot of the or the orthodox concierge systems that we have in hotels. I would even say that beyond the normal concierge systems, even in the guest rooms, I think a lot of guest rooms would have voice technology because it really gives you a very, very cool feeling about the application. It gives you a wow factor. If a hotel is going to charge you an extra dollar value for usage, starting with the voice concierge systems and then going up to the other applications of voice in a hotel, it really gives you a dollar value ROI pretty quickly, just because of the wow factor, just because of the ease with which you can use the application with voice commands. I think it's here to stay. A lot of companies are opening up. Of course, the United States technologies are advanced, but we are working with companies based in Australia as our partner. We are developing technologies in-house which can operate and interoperate with other connectivity ecosystem partners that we have. And I feel it's the future for the hospitality industry. Absolutely no doubts about that.
Thank you so much. So we heard a lot of kind of see and watch, as well as question about ROI. So seems like the voice concierge technology has still a lot of long way to go before it's fully implemented. So perhaps what alternatives do we have in the market available? I know that Steve at Operto, they're watching the space and perhaps piloting a better guest experience through a mobile concierge.
Yeah, I mean, again, Operto really made its name sort of we're really good at IoT. So from unlocking the doors to temperature control to occupancy setbacks to the sort of table stakes in terms of being able to control from the owner side and the guest side sort of that experience. Where we're going with our push now is to say, okay, listen, if we're going to see a platformification of the industry and an ecosystem which wants to sort of tie its value in, we need to understand through like intelligent technology, intelligent design, and like not building technology for technology's sake, but actually trying to understand where are all the friction points. That is where we are trying to hang our hat and be a place where we can connect those dots for everyone in the ecosystem, because we know what we're good at, but we also know where the industry is going. So I think that, you know, from purely a strategic perspective, we, you know, to that side of the business for sure. I don't think that we've necessarily cracked that nut yet, and we've necessarily found the easiest way for, you know, if you think of it sort of as a triangle of like sort of guest, owner, and ancillary services, we feel that there's a long way to go, and we're taking a technology first approach to figure that out.
Yeah, great point. Dimitrios, Siobhan as well mentioned the potential cybersecurity attacks and privacy breaches in relation to IoT. So how safe is this technology to be implemented?
Yeah, it's a fair point. And also I've seen some comments on from the group here about concerns about privacy and security. And I do think that it's right to give data privacy the prominence it deserves. It's not only for IoT, but it's more important for IoT because the IoT side of things is less mature than, say, the standard internet information stack. So those technologies have come to mature over several decades, 2 to 3 decades at least. And we've reached a point now where most people don't worry too much about very basic breaches of security for websites. You have got SSL, TLS, HTTPS. You have technologies out there which give you some basic coverage. But the main point is that it's not the technology that matters, it's the usage, it's the user and what they do to secure things. And when you're dealing with a technology that's not as mature as other technologies, it's harder for an inexpert user to understand the implications of what they do and how they link it to their operation. So if, for example, as a apartment operator or as a short-let operator, you distribute your product through the web for people to book and pay, I would say it's reasonably standard what you can do to secure technology, secure privacy and all that. But if you're putting devices in a home, be that cameras, be that smart locks or whatever, or thermostats or whatever, there's many more places where breaches can occur. So you need to be quite savvy to know what you're doing or entrust that to a professional operator. Well, like Steve, if you're an IoT business and you know what these things are, you probably understand the vulnerabilities and they can advise you as to what the issues are. But as an inexpert service business that is buying technology, I would say you are better off outsourcing that to the experts. And this is the issue. It's an immaturity of the technology. I would say in a decade, this stuff here will clear itself out, but we are at the beginning of that journey.
Yeah, so I'm just seeing a lot of the questions that are sort of streaming in around, you know, I'm a smaller provider. I'm a larger operator with more inexperienced sort of third-party providers. I think, you know, not to pump our own tires, but to really like, if you're not a digital native and you're looking for technology that's going to fundamentally not only shift your business, but allow you to sort of jump the chasm into this new world post-COVID or whatever you call it, I do agree with Dimitrios. It's like companies like ourselves, we do this all day, every day, and we handhold customers, whether you're you know, got 5 doors, 10 doors, 100 doors, 500 doors, you're a mega operator. The journey looks different for everyone, and the need for an intelligent solutioning design cannot be overstated. So I do believe that, you know, you can do the research, but a lot of the time the best way to sort of jump into it is to reach out and just say, listen, this is my situation, this is my PMS, this is my locks, these are the different things that I have going on in my business. how would this potentially work? What should I be doing? And there's enough of us who have been in the space for, I'd like to say well ahead of the curve, that now that the wave is building, we've been in the ocean with our surfboard for years already. And so we welcome those conversations. We absolutely are here to help, because it can be a daunting thing, right? If you are new to it, and not everyone grew up on the internet. Not everyone is a digital native. Not everyone, works on their phone all day. So, please, we'd love to help.
Steve, could also put this in a bit of context for people who are operators here who are thinking, what are these techie guys talking about? This is like a tech thing, and it's just it's overrated. Yeah. I'll put a bit of context here, which is that think about the alternative. Think about, for example, entering your own home with a metal key. How secure is a metal key versus a digital lock? A metal key can be copied. There's companies that can copy it sight unseen. You can just send a photo, it will copy it for you. If somebody wants to break into your home, breaking a 256 AES authentication protocol is way more complex than basically just breaking into the window. So some of the stuff has to do with perception, not with actual risk. Perceived risk and perceived risks is what we're talking about here. And I think understanding the technology trade-offs and risks here is important when you're making those technology decisions. And I would say this is not the prevail of just small companies thinking, how do I connect a digital lock with lights and sensors in a hospitality setting for 20, 30, 40 properties. The big guys, the hotels, also have vulnerabilities. They're probably worse than you. They have way more vulnerabilities, and they're way kind of behind the curve in many ways. So don't think that this is an issue just for small guy here. It's the big guys too.
Absolutely. And I think that to be honest, as this sort of shift happens, I think being a smaller operator is actually advantageous, because you kind of call the shots and you can afford to take a look and shop around and really get sort of white glove service, because you're sort of still on the pioneering edge of where the industry is going. To shift an entire hotel chain over to some it is a big undertaking. Whereas if you have 10, 5, 2, 1 doors, 20 doors, whatever, you are perfectly positioned to test this out. And it's not a huge, if you moved from a rotary phone to an iPhone or to a, it's not a huge shift. You've done it before. And I think that it's an exciting time to be a property owner, to be an ancillary service provider, or to be a guest, because the technology is just going to keep getting better and better and better.
That's a great point. And also what you highlighted about the perceived risk is really an excellent point. So we have here the question by Jessica. So great panel. So great work, guys. Great job. What do the panelists see as the biggest challenge to smart tech adoption? So would that be the perceiving risk, or is there anything else that we did not mention?
It's one of those things when, I think the switch over from like the metal key, how old are keys? I want to say hundreds, if not thousands of
2,000 years old.
Okay, so there you go.
Metal keys.
And so that's old technology, and it kind of works. And, you can walk down to the local store and get it copied 1,000 times, and it is super insecure. Really, I think it's just a matter of, we've got, I don't know what the proliferation of smartphones is, but if it's not close to 100%, it's got to be pretty close, especially amongst the sort of industry that we're talking with. I think that, eventually technology will be in everyone's pocket. And so this will just become the norm versus the exception. I still think that we still are transitioning a little bit. Not everyone is comfortable necessarily with having their entire journey through a smart device. So you might still need that level of, the front desk, the concierge service, et cetera. But I really believe that we're going to see the last vestiges of that sail into the sunset in the next 5 years. And I really do think that, again, the pioneers in the tech space in this vertical who figure out how to seamlessly transition people from the old world to the new world are absolutely going to be the ones who win.
Perhaps Carolina can be a bit more controversial on Steve here and just say that the biggest challenge here is trust. And the reason why trust is a big challenge is because the business models that we gotten used to as consumers in the first wave, which was the actual Internet of Information, were the Google model, where you give up a bit of privacy in exchange for free services. You can get now free email, you can get free everything online, but you have to give up a bit of your privacy so that Google can sell its services to third-party companies for advertising. That's the established business model. We accepted that as consumers. Now, the equivalent of that does not exist yet for the IoT side. We haven't yet gotten to a place of comfort in terms of how much privacy do you want to give up so that this whole thing can be platformized. And would you guys be willing, how much information are you willing to give to Amazon in terms of what you say to Alexa, or how much you say to Apple, to Siri? How much privacy do you want to give in terms of how many screenshots of your face can be taken in public, or how much an internal facing camera can record? That will have to clear itself out. And in my view, the gold standard here is European GDPR. GDPR and privacy is what will drive, in my view, adoption. And I think most people don't realize this, that by safeguarding GDPR, we are also safeguarding the chance to platformize everything.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, absolutely. We get this a lot as well. People asking, how can we ensure that the guest experience is going to be always a secure one, even now more than ever during COVID generally. So yeah, I can see there's a few more questions. So perhaps I will take one last.
Can I answer Beth's question? She just typed up there.
Yes, I thought, that was a really good one.
Let's go with this one. Okay, good. Listen, I don't think that it's necessarily I'm going to pick one or the other. I really believe that you should look into both. It's not like the cost of entry is prohibitive at all. I think on the guest side, because we are seeing such a seismic shift to the sort of more digitally savvy native traveler guest, where there's an expectation of a technological interaction, you're going to enhance the guest experience if that is the expectation. So I believe that the investment makes sense. From your side, from the operational side, it just allows a much more step back and survey the field approach, a little bit less hands-on, a little bit more being able to watch things happen in your ecosystem as they happen. So my recommendation would be to try both if that's at all possible. And if you had to choose one, I'd probably start with the guest experience.
Awesome. Dimitrios, do you have anything to add as closing remarks, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that some of this choice, I can see the way of thinking of some of the operators here, and the questions they ask, quite sort of savvy questions. And I think what I would suggest is also don't frame these things about choices, alternative choices between guest-facing or internal-facing, where is the ROI coming from and all that. View them slightly differently. View them as, to what extent do I build technology capability internally? How and where do I become technology savvy? You don't have to actually build all this tech yourself, but you have to smarten up enough to be able to make some purchasing decisions that are smart. And I think that's the issue, is to what extent and where do you become a technology business?
For sure.
Fair point. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to both of you for this really exciting, a bit controversial discussion. So yeah, thank you so much. We're going to have now a fireside chat with James Foice, the CEO of the ASAP Association. So please stay tuned.
to the Fireside Chat session of the 2020 AltaVita Symposium Day 3. My name is Vivi Chayati. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AltaVita. Today, it is my honor to be joined by James Foice. James is the CEO of the Association of Service Apartment Providers, the trade body for the service apartment sector with members in 25 countries. This section will be particularly interesting for short-term rentals operators and property managers, as we will learn how the service apartment sector has done such an incredible job to deliver assurance and quality management. Welcome, James. I'd like to start, please, if that's okay with you, with your journey, how you start from your vision to formulating a scientific recipe for guest experience to establishing such an awesome organization like the ASAP.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And we're very humble. We need to put this into perspective. What we've done is quite significant as an industry, and certainly for recognizing quality measurement. And we'll talk about that in a second. But there's still so much work to do. So by no means has this journey finished or has been completed in any way. So let's talk a little bit about that, if I can. I mean, my experience within the hospitality industry goes back some time. I was working with the airline industry, working in the airline industry for Virgin Atlantic and British Airways. And I was always fascinated by the guest expectation and then the experience a guest would have after the event, and how their disappointment levels or how their euphoria around the experience that they had enjoyed during the process of travel were measured. And I would talk to a lot of people about in-flight catering, for which I was responsible for at the time. And there was this stigma associated with in-flight catering, particularly not being very good, and the expectation, it was almost, as I say, a stigma associated with it, a comical expectation that in-flight catering wasn't very good. And that really disappointed us all, because there was millions and millions of pounds being spent on the food and beverage product that one would receive as they traveled. So I would always try and understand a bit more about it. What was it about that product that disappointed the guest or a friend or a personal acquaintance or whatever it was? And it was all very simply down to expectations. And I think the brand that we were representing at the time had a certain expectation, or the guests that were traveling on that airline had a certain expectation. And if that expectation wasn't met, there would be a degree of disappointment. And that therefore reflected itself in a poor rating of the quality of the product. And I thought, well, that's unfair. That's not as simple as saying that it wasn't very good. What we're saying here is the expectation wasn't met. And I think if we undo all of that, it's really interesting. And this was prior to online reputational management scores and TripAdvisor reviews or Google reviews or any individual reviews that you would see now in a virtual environment. This was around trying to understand what guests would expect and therefore what was delivered. And I spent a lot of time working within the tourism and travel sector after my time in the airline. And it fascinated me how the star grading programs that we're all familiar with within the hotel and travel world varied from one place to another. So specific markets in different markets around the world would have a different expectation for a star grading program. And I found that absolutely enthralling, that the travel industry hadn't come together to try to provide a simple benchmark that met everybody's expectations. So that's really what we've tried to do in our little remit within the service department world. And we implemented an accreditation program which majors on the safety and due diligence responsibility for travelers who are using service departments, with the aspect, or with the opportunity to have them aware that at the very basic level of accreditation, the product that they were staying in would be safe. And we've grown it since there. So as you rightly said, we have members in 25 countries. Who have gone through the accreditation program as is. So our aspirations looking forward are to create something, in fact, all of the details available, but to create something that allows the expectation of the guest to be understood, and therefore the delivery of the actual quality to be measured. So there is the variance, which I think is really fascinating. And it's a holistic position whereby online reputational management and individual quality scores are compared and marketed. So lots of work to do.
And how is the current situation affecting how the organization has been operating? And as you can see, the pandemic probably has caused a lot of closure and swapped hands in many different hospitality operators and assets. What do you think the organization or the sector as a whole could do to take advantage of this, perhaps an opportunity, and also imbalancing supply and demand?
Sure. I mean, it's a really interesting time, isn't it? Because we are facing unprecedented challenges as an industry, whether that's accommodation, hospitality, or travel as a generic. But people are traveling. And you can only see, you know, the support of that is what happened in the summer months in the UK, whereby Cornwall and Devon, typical tourist hotspots, were 100% full. So there's definitely demand for travel, and it's more around understanding where that demand's coming from and understanding how that provision can be met. And of course, you know, service departments, and we've been saying it for such a long time, provide significantly more space than a conventional hotel style bedroom, and you have more flexibility because you have your own kitchen space and you have your own often lounge space, somewhere to sit, and then somewhere separate to sleep. So that flexibility has really driven the demand that we've seen for service departments during the last 6 months of this pandemic. And just to sort of put that into context, you know, our members have been operating at around 55% occupancy during a period where the hotel world has been closed. So it's about finding new opportunities, perhaps not quite so business related, more leisure driven, and looking at those opportunities to stole the virtues, I suppose, of the service department world.
Amazing. And what is your insights from your experience in the last 35 years in the hospitality sector? How many crises have you experienced, James?
Thanks for reminding me how long I've been doing this. It is interesting. We've all lived through some big challenges. Nobody that I have ever worked with or understood has seen challenges that we're facing at the moment. Certainly, but of course there were terrorist threats 20 years ago, there were security issues before that, there's been pandemics and there's been warfare. And I think what's so heartening at the moment is the hospitality industry is able to flex and create a product that meets the expectations that we talk about and the demands that are out there at the moment. So I think it's a really positive point. I'm putting a positive spin on everything that we're doing at the moment because the opportunities will come back. And I think the client, whoever the client is of accommodation, of the travel experience, whether they're business related or whether they're leisure or whether they're a combination of all of those sort of parameters, they will become more demanding in the choices that they make.
Oh, amazing. That's really, really refreshing to hear that perspective. Thank you, James. And moving on to the alternative accommodation sector, more commonly known as the short-term rental sector. As you know, they have gained prominence in the last decade, but challenges like assurance or quality management will still continue to be seen. So what do you think this sector can learn from the service apartment industry when it comes to quality management?
I think, you know, it's fair to say that our entire industry is all part of one long spectrum of accommodation, and whether it's the short-term rental industry at one end of it or the branded hotels at the other end of it, we should all learn from each other. And I think that's really important. For me, I think the experiences I've had, certainly at ASAP, is around recognition and trust in that brand. And that's really what we were trying to do with the service department sector 20 years ago when we were first formed. That the traveller did not understand the concept of service departments. So there needed to be some kind of confidence mechanisms put in place to provide those assurances to the traveller. And that's where we sort of excelled as a trade association. And that's where we brought in accreditation to try and help understand or have those travellers understand the due diligence, the duty of care, the responsibility that was being put on them. And it's about trust. So I think all the entire spectrum of accommodation can learn from each other and really understand what it is about trusting the product, and more importantly, delivering the product that they're claiming to. And we, just to put that into context, we are contacted regularly by travelers who are arriving in different markets in the world and see us as a regulatory body. And they may well be disappointed with the apartment they've received for whatever the reasons are. And sometimes, as we've said, those apartments don't even exist. So that's the differentiator. And that's where we as an accommodation industry need to be able to provide those confidence mechanisms to the traveler.
And that said, do you think that the short-term rentals operators or independent property managers can be accredited with the ASAP? And if so, how can they do that?
Absolutely. And there are many number of different accreditation schemes out there. And of course, we need to find a way of homogenizing and aligning all of these things. But until that point is there, absolutely. Now, just to be clear, ASAP is the trade association, but the accreditation arm of ASAP is called ISAP, which is the International Service Department Accreditation Program, and it's open to anyone. We have a number of different accreditation options, from an entry point which is very accessible to any individual unit. But the important thing is that it's accessible and it is a robust and credible process that provides assurances to the consumer that the operator, whoever that operator happens to be, is delivering what they're claiming to do. And that's very, very important.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jim. Really, I think it's been such an insightful discussion with you, and I'm sure that the property managers and short-term rental operators will benefit from this session. So I'd like to end with a few questions, if you don't mind. I was reading a lot about you, of course, prior to this interview, and I realized that you are a foodie, and so am I. So I have just some questions, and feel free to elaborate a bit more about your hobby. But if you could eat only one thing for the rest of your life, James, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. I suppose if I was health conscious, it would probably be lots of fruit and vegetables. But of course, if it was one thing, I don't know, goodness me. Really good quality chocolate, I think.
Oh, I didn't expect that. And what is your go-to comfort food?
Comfort food is probably a traditional roast meal with all of the trimmings. I think it's a hobby of mine now, food, but it used to be a profession. I was a restaurateur for some times, and my involvement within the airline business was the in-flight food product, as I said. So it was a commercial decision I made. But at that time, I will have to say, as a chef, probably one of the hardest meals to pull together properly is a traditional roast meal. So I would say that would be it.
Oh, I didn't know that actually. So next time I have a roast, I'll be sure to appreciate it. And do you have any family secret or famous recipe?
I did create a recipe when I lived in the north of the UK for a company that was making, so I was a development chef at that time, and I created a recipe for a pork pie product that won the best in class within all of the north of the UK. So I can't share that recipe with you, I'm afraid, but that was something that we did. And it was very interesting.
But can you share your favorite restaurant that people don't tend to know about?
Yes, I can, and it's probably not one that many people would expect. I worked and traveled quite extensively in West Africa for a long time, and I was in the Gambia, and there was a little restaurant on the beach that used to have its own fishing nets, and they used to go fishing first thing in the morning and bring in the catch, and they would create these amazing fresh fish dishes with vegetables that they would seal in pouches, tinfoil pouches, and bury them in the sand with lots of seasoning and flavors and fresh herbs. And they would dig them up at lunchtime, and we would go along and eat. So it was absolutely the most incredible location in the middle of the tropical West African beaches with these quite wonderful seafood dishes. So
Oh, I'm very jealous. I'll be sure to try and visit. But yeah, you definitely have answered the question. Restaurant that people probably don't know about at all. Well, I think that's it, James. Thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate it, and the whole AltaVita team as well. And I'm sure that this will add to an incredible series to our symposium. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and really well done for everything you're doing. We're delighted with it. So thank you very much, Vivi.